Everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aziza, and I am a pharmacist, nutritionist, and a wellness coach at King City Pure Pharmacy at the Dufferin Plaza there. I think most of you do know me, so I don't have to go further into that. This is sort of a continuation of the topic on inflammation that we started last month. And I kind of wanted to talk, I know some of you who have been with me have heard me before. You've heard me talk about my own healing journey, like bits and pieces here. And I thought it would be a really good idea to actually talk about everything that I kind of went through, what I did in order to heal my own inflammation, because that kind of fits in with it. And the reason why I guess a story is important is because it makes you realize that what's possible for me is also possible for you. And I think that's, when I say from pain to purpose, really that kind of became my purpose when I healed, was to really let people become aware of the possibilities, right? Because when I started, I had no idea I would be here in 5 years. So we'll talk about a bit of my journey, and then we'll talk about the lessons that I actually learned. And a lot of them I've sort of talked about in bits and pieces, but again, I just wanted to sort of give you a piece, an idea about, you know, a lot of these lessons seem very simple, but they're actually life-changing, and they really reduce inflammation in the body, okay? So we'll start off. The other thing I wanted to point out that this will be our last workshop because we can break for summer, and we'll be back again, probably end of September, end of October, and then we'll again continue with our series on inflammation, because we talked about all those things that can impact you, and we'll take each of them and go a big dive into that, okay? So, wrong place, this is where I need to point. Let's see. Can someone, if I think it can mute, can everybody mute themselves online, please? Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to share this picture with you. I think some of you remember Dr. Sabanathan that was there. That's me and Heather, and this is actually April 28th, 2018. This was when I used to work at South Lake, and every year we would do a 5-kilometer run for South Lake, and this was me 2 days before my diagnosis of an inflammatory autoimmune condition. So there I was running a 5-kilometer race. And on April 28th, May 1st, I go to my rheumatologist and I have a confirmed diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. So you can just imagine how I mean, it was such a shock to my system, because I thought I was doing everything right. I was active, and everything was fine. And I'll talk about, you know, how it really did start. So let's move on. Okay, there you go. I don't know how to get rid of that little thing at the bottom. Oh, there you go. So as a pharmacist, I knew what rheumatoid arthritis meant. You know, as a disease, this is the definition that you will find in medical journals and pharmacy journals. Rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic, progressive, and painful autoimmune disease that affects the joints and other organs, including the heart and lungs. Untreated patients can suffer significant functional loss and joint damage, which can impact their quality of life, example, sleep, mental health, ability to remain in the labor force, and overall health. This is what I knew in 2018 when I got my diagnosis. This is what I knew about the disease. So you can just imagine, this really threw me into like a vicious cycle of fear. So when I say it's really a story of fear, pain, which then turned into hope and healing. So I had to process through a lot of these painful emotions, because this is what I knew. For me, my life had turned upside down on that day when they said that, oh my God, you have rheumatoid arthritis, right? She moved into your apartment, is that right? This isn't gonna work for me today. I live there with my 3 children. So just to give an idea of how it really started. So my first symptoms really started in September 2017, and all I had was, it was after actually a soccer tournament on the Monday, you know, it was a soccer tournament for my kids, and on Monday I was noticing my finger was kind of getting stuck, you know, and I spoke to my friend. I said, you know, maybe I clapped too hard, maybe I broke something, you know, and my friend's like, yeah, you go a little crazy at those tournaments, so it's possible. So then I thought, okay, let me just go to Dr. Sabanathan and ask him. Maybe it's broken, at least they can fix it, right? So I go to him, and the first thing he says to me that it could be rheumatoid arthritis. And I'm like, no, like, you know, I wasn't even thinking along the line. There's no family history. It wasn't even in the back of my mind that it could be arthritis. It was just one finger. And so I was like, well, he's not my family doctor. As much as I liked him and I trusted him, I thought, well, he's not my family doctor. Let me book an appointment. So I booked an appointment with my family doctor, and she goes, you know, we should get you checked out for rheumatoid arthritis. And I go, but it's just one finger. She goes, it doesn't matter. Let's just do the blood work. Maybe if it's negative, then no worries. So I went in, and so she sent me for a blood check. And one of the things they measure is called RF factor, rheumatoid factor. So she said, let's get that done. And I asked her at the time, can you also do my vitamin D levels? I don't know what prompted me to do that because she was doing other blood works. And I said, just do my vitamin D levels. So she said, fine. I had to pay for it, but I got it done. So the results come back and my RF is positive. So that's kind of sign that, yeah, it could be rheumatoid. And my vitamin D is 17. Now, normal vitamin D, normal range starts at 70. So I was really, really low. And so I was like, started reading about it. And of course, the more I read, I realized, well, having low vitamin D, because vitamin D is an immune modulator, right? So having low vitamin D can actually put you at high risk of autoimmune conditions. And there's a lot of research. And so for those of you who I've spoken to during medication reviews, you know I'm very passionate about vitamin D. I make sure everybody is on vitamin D because living in this northern hemisphere, we don't get enough, right? So that's just the story aside. So my vitamin D is low. I start supplementing, but my doctor says, go to a rheumatologist, you know, just get it checked out. So she sends me to a specialist. He looks at my joints and he goes that, you know, it doesn't look like rheumatoid arthritis. It's probably, you know, it's just because it was really mild. It was just one finger stiff in the morning. And so she goes, and he goes, well, let's go more testing anyways, just to ruling out. So he sends me to get something called anti-CCP done, right? So that's another blood test that's very specific for rheumatoid. And so I go in, I get that test done. I book myself a trip to the south because my vitamin D is so low. And I'm like, I need to get my vitamin D up. So I book myself a trip. I go down south. I come back, do the run. I have an appointment booked with him on May 1st. And when I go in, he tells me, your RF is positive, your anti-CCP is positive, you have rheumatoid arthritis, you know? And he goes, well, your symptoms are very mild, but we can start you off. And, you know, like I said, what I knew about rheumatoid arthritis was really scary stuff. I didn't know, and I knew the kind of stuff they use are pretty, you know, big guns in terms of the medications that they use. So I go to the dermatologist, you know, I really don't want to use those big guns. I want to use something mild. And he goes, okay, I'll give you something mild, but we'll see. And in passing, he goes to me, well, you know, just make sure you're not eating too many, you know, processed foods. And so it was really interesting coming from a doctor because they don't usually comment. And a rheumatologist for that matter, right? He goes to me, just make sure you kind of watch your diet. And I go, well, I've already started working on my diet because as soon as I found that it could be, I thought, okay, you know, I want to make sure, you know, my diet was clean to begin with because as a nutritionist, I had cleaned up my diet. But I was still eating some stuff which could be inflammatory, right? So I'd done that already. So the interesting thing was that, you know, from September to May, that was like about 9 months, you know, I was really just that finger, you know, I'd be a little bit stiff in the morning and then I'd be fine. I was living my life normally. But as soon as I got my diagnosis, within 2 months, like by the end of July, I remember coming back, like I started progressing really fast, right? By the end of July, I'm coming back from a trip and I can't even go up the stairs. My knees were so inflamed. And my daughter's like, Mom, it's just your diet. Maybe you're away. You weren't eating well. You know, she was like panicking because within the 2 months of really getting that diagnosis, I plummeted, like, you know, and then by the end of the year, December 2018, I was fully inflamed. Like it progressed so fast. Initially from the first symptom to the diagnosis, it wasn't so bad. But it almost feels like as soon as my mind got involved, thinking, oh my God, the fears got involved, I just plummeted down. And I'll sort of share with you what actually happened in terms of the challenges. Oh, sorry, it did work this time. There you go. So now rheumatoid arthritis affects joints in the body, right? So there's 360 joints in a human body, approximately. And at that point, when I was fully inflamed, it felt like every joint in my body was inflamed. Joints I didn't even know existed. So when it has been inflamed, it wasn't just the pain, it was a stiffness. Those two were the like massive symptoms. Not every joint was inflamed, but it felt like that, right? So in terms of my inflammation, my fingers. So my fingers, remember, I started off with one finger kind of getting stuck like this, and then it was fine. By the end of the year, I could make a fist. I was stuck like this. This is all we could bend. This is how stiff my fingers were. My elbows were hurting. My shoulders were in so much pain. At nighttime, I was actually sleeping with two heating pads, electrical heating pads. I had one on this side, one on that side. And I would wake up, if I had to turn, I would be in so much pain. I would put a heating pad and I'd probably scream, and then I would turn because it was so painful. I couldn't lift my arm. I had to change my wardrobe because I had to get everything that was buttoned down. I could not put anything over my head. This is how painful my shoulders were. My neck was inflamed as well. Actually, the other day I was having a conversation with my daughter, and she goes, "Do you remember you used to actually ask us to check your blind spot?" Because I couldn't turn all the way. This is how stiff my neck was. Then my jaws were inflamed as well. I had trouble chewing my food early on in that 2018. Hip was very stiff. It wasn't painful, but it was very stiff. And my knees were, oh gosh, stiff, painful. Ankles were very inflamed. I had trouble walking. I was visibly limping. This is how bad they got. And my feet, I didn't realize how many bones you have on your feet, bottom and top. They would be like burning. This is how inflamed they were. And my toes. So it was just like, it felt like my entire simple things such as getting ready to go out. Like I stopped going out because I just couldn't even get ready. It was so painful. And the fatigue, forgot to put it down. The fatigue, because that's also part of autoimmune when you are, inflamed systemically. The fatigue was so bad, I could barely function. I would the 2 days I stopped working at the pharmacy, I told Hayla, that's it. I'm going to quit. I don't want to do anything anymore. But I still worked at the hospital because I thought if I left that, I'd probably get depressed. So I continued that. But it was a struggle to wake up in the morning. I'd be so stiff and I would have to do slowly, finally, as I started moving, but I was in pain. If I sat for a bit, I would get up. My knees were so stiff, I would have to just stand there for a bit and then kind of limp and walk, But more so what I want to talk about is that my head and heart were filled with such painful, negative emotions, right? Fear was number one. Like I was so afraid. When I got my diagnosis, you come home and you start reading about it. So I joined all these Facebook groups, thinking, oh, it can help me. But the more I joined, the more all these stories of pain and inflammation and people getting, distorted joints and people getting surgeries like within 3 months of diagnosis, and the fear kept building. I was like, and I think that was a huge factor, and we'll talk about what the emotions, how impactful they are in terms of your health. Fear was huge. It was a huge driving force in that initial phases. Then shame. I was so ashamed of being sick. It almost felt to me, and I don't know if other people have experienced that, but I didn't want anybody to know. And more so because for those of you who remember, when we used to do presentations at the old library before they moved, right? And I used to talk about wellness, and I thought, well, how can I get sick? And in fact, a family member even said to me that when I explained to them, this is what I've got, and they said, well, but you eat healthy, you exercise, right? Those are the two things we think is supposed to keep us well. And I was like, there was a lot of shame. I didn't want to share. I didn't want anyone to know that I was sick. But life has it, I kept losing weight, and it was an excessive weight loss. I mean, weight loss is good. I was hoping to lose weight, but I lost like 30 pounds in that 1 year. It was so noticeable. And of course, people, when you lose weight, they're like, oh, what are you doing? You're losing weight. And I was like, I didn't want to tell them, but I couldn't lie. So as ashamed as I was of being sick, I had to tell them. And here's the interesting thing. And I think a lot of times, and maybe it's a societal thing, maybe it's our conditioning, we don't talk about our illness, and many people suffer in silence. So many people that I knew from my community, they came up to me and said, I've had this condition for so long too. Nobody wants to talk about it. So it was really interesting, but it felt like, and I remember because I didn't want to talk about it, and I kept losing weight. And that same friend of mine that's always intelligent, gives me all intelligent advice. She goes to me, maybe you're supposed to talk about this. That's why you keep losing weight, and people keep asking you, well, how did you lose weight? I go, I don't know. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sick, right? I had a lot of anger. I was angry that I did everything right. I thought I was, eating well, like what went wrong? And hopelessness. I really felt that my life was over. I was such a doer. I was doing all these things. I was looking after my elderly parents. I'm like, who's going to look after that? I had kids. I had plans for my life. And I thought, oh my gosh, life is over as I knew it. So this was what was going through my head in those initial phases, right? And so this is the journey that I decided to take, right? And again, I'm sharing this not because this is the right way, but I'm sharing this because this is what I felt was right for me, right? And so after I saw the rheumatologist, and he told me, take the medication. But again, I had so much fear, not of the disease, also of the medication. And you think as a pharmacist, I should be better at that. But I was so afraid of taking anything. So I go to my family doctor and I said to her that, give me some time, just give me 6 months. I just want to see if there's anything else I can do, And I said, my symptoms aren't too bad, because this was at the beginning, May, around when I got diagnosed. And I said, I don't want to go back to the rheumatologist because I know he's going to ask me why I'm not starting on the medication. And she was very supportive. She goes, okay, you know what? I'll give you anti-inflammatories. You can start with Advil. I'll give you Celebrex. If it gets bad in terms of your pain, take that. And get your blood work done regularly. I don't want you to, keep getting inflamed and you don't realize it. And she said, if you need to change a rheumatologist after, we'll send you to a different one. That's fine. So she gave me that time, because deep inside of me, there was that voice that kept saying, there's got to be something else. There's got to be, how is your body attacking itself intuitively? And again, like I'm saying, it's my journey. This was me. It's not necessarily the right thing. But for me, there was that voice that kept saying, go find out, maybe there's something else you could do, right? Why is your body turning on itself? Because autoimmune is when your immune system starts attacking its own cells. So that was that voice, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So then the first thing, again, my diet already removed the inflammatory foods from, as soon as I found that it could possibly be the rheumatoid arthritis, I had removed those foods anyway. So that was okay. But it wasn't putting a dent in my pain. I was still, despite eating, anti-inflammatory diet, it wasn't affecting me because other things were causing my inflammation. So the first thing I did was see the naturopathic doctor. And I honestly think, and I had never seen one, but somebody recommended one, and I went to see, and that really changed the trajectory of my illness. So this is about a month after, I think it was June, that I went to see her. And I'm coming with a lot of fear, a lot of hopelessness, like, oh my God, life is over. And when people have, I've been diagnosed, people know about it, my family knows about it, but and all these feelings that inside of me, I haven't expressed that to anybody, right? But it's building up. When I go to my doctor, the first thing she asked me, I sit down, the first thing she asked me, how do you feel about this? And I said to her, I'm gonna cry. And she passes me a box of tissue and she goes, this is a safe space. How do you feel? And for that 1 hour, I bawled my eyes out because I was so distraught inside. There was so much fear. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do that. My life is over. I had this plan. I had that plan. So she listened to me. And at the end of it, she said to me that, I know people who have gotten better. This is not the end of your life. And this was the first time someone gave me hope. Everywhere on the internet, every definition that I had read meant that this was a progressively worsening condition. Nowhere had I read that you could get better. Yes, there were some of you take medications, maybe it will help you, maybe it won't. There was no guarantee. There was no one had said to me, you can get better. I have seen people get better. And I felt like my life was back, right? So I said to her, okay, what can I do? And so she said to me, let's figure out what's causing. And so she kind of worked through, and I asked her, can you give me something for the pain? So she gave me some supplements. And the last thing she said to me after hearing me for that hour crying, and I can't do this, I can't do that, she goes to me, you have a lot of emotional stuff stuck inside of you. You got to work through that. And I was like, what do you mean? That didn't make sense to me. I said, well, no, I was actually I didn't tell her, but I was annoyed. Like, what does she mean? I thought I was pretty well-rounded. I didn't have emotions stuck inside of me. I didn't get that, right? But here's the thing, when life wants you to learn something, it will keep sending messages through your way. So a few weeks later, I see a friend of mine, and I told her, well, this is what's happened. And certain things really stay in your head. And, she holds my hand and she goes, Aziza, rheumatoid arthritis has an emotional component to it. And I go, yes, that's what my ND told me, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to explore what's inside of me. So she gave me a name of a coach. She gave me a book to read, and she goes, check it out. Just think about it. And then in July, I'm at another soccer tournament. My kids were big in soccer, and by that time, I'm visibly limping. I was getting quite inflamed. And I hear of someone else that I know from other tournaments talking to someone else about this emotional healing that she's done, and it's really changed her life. And I'm thinking, these things keep coming back to me. There must be a reason why life keeps sending these messages to me. So I talked to her, and she kind of explained what she has worked on and the coach that she worked with. So she gave me a number, and this was July. Of course, I sit on it. I'm not doing anything. I'm progressively getting worse. In August, I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna like call them. So I called one of the coaches, and I'll call the other one, and I met with her. And I still remember the place where I met. It's, certain things are life-changing, and they kind of stay in your head. And I remember she said to me that I don't know if this work will heal you, because that's not her expertise. Her expertise was just really coaching, right? But she goes, I do know one thing, that all these emotions that you feel inside, when you work through them, your life changes. People around you may be the same, but your perception of life just changes. You don't think of life the way you're thinking right now, because I was upset, angry, hopeless. And I know I had, now that I look back, I've said to quite a few people before, is that, I used to think I'm an angry person because I had, things would irritate me, upset me, and I ruminate about it for days. Like, I may not say anything, but it would run in my head. And so I knew there was some emotions I was holding on to, but I didn't know how to work through. So I worked with that coach, and she was very new, but she gave me the tools, and that's all I needed. And that, I worked with her for about 3 months, and I went on a retreat with her. And stuff I learned, I had no idea, that there was so much of that anger and resentment, all that was inside of me, right? So what I got from her were tools, and I still use those tools, and they were life-changing. So that was number one I did. I also worked with a homeopath, which was highly recommended by people that had great success. But for me, it didn't do anything. But again, maybe something it did that I didn't realize. And then the third thing that was really life-changing, fourth thing that was life-changing for me, was healing my gut. Now, I knew that my gut had a role in it because as a nutritionist, I had learned that gut bacteria play a role in inflammation. But I didn't know how to heal it. I didn't know any of that stuff. And so, I come across this seminar that this functional medicine doctor, and I knew about functional medicine, what they do and all that through, again, my nutrition background. I heard about the free seminar he was doing in Mississauga in February. It's in the middle of winter, it's snowstorm, and I'm like, I was just like, and I'm sick, I'm not even, and I'm like, okay, I'm going. Like, so things, I felt like life just pushed me in that direction. So I go there and I listen to him, and again, he's talking about inflammation, and I went to talk to him after, and he told me about his clients that have done this work, and they got better, right? The inflammation went down. And so I was like, okay, I'm signing up, and there were two leap of faith. One was with my coach where I'm like, okay, I paid up front, leap of faith. Here again, leap of faith. I paid up front, and normally I would actually consult with him. I'll call him like, this is how much is it? Should I? None of that. Gave him the Visa card, and I said, sign me up. And I worked through that, and and during that time, I also did a bit of acupuncture because I thought that, because again, all that work, the emotional healing I was doing, the working with that, I was still in pain. 2019 was probably my worst year. I was in pain, many breakdowns I had because it was just so excruciating, the pain. I couldn't do anything, the basic things. And I was even talking to my kids the other day, who was cooking while I was sick? I haven't forgotten. And she goes, well, you were cooking, but I think you were helping you and eating out a lot. And I don't even remember any of that because I think I was so distraught at the time. But I kept at it. I kept persevering, okay, I'm like, it takes time. I said, okay, I'll keep doing it. And then in September, and I had read about meditation. I'd actually years before, after I had done my nutrition, I did a meditation course. I got certification for it, but I never made it part of my daily practice. But I know there were a lot of studies that show meditation actually lowers your inflammatory markers. I'm like, okay, I got to start that. So I said, but it was such a long time ago. I thought, okay, let me take another course. So I took another course. And I started a meditation practice. And in between, I had actually gone on a few courses. I had done some retreats. So I really went deep down. I started reading books, taking courses. I was just like, and I kept working on my emotional state. And that was changing. Like that fear went away. I had a lot more faith. I had a lot of trust in life, right? So that started happening while I was working on my gut. And the next slide will tell you when things started to look up. November 2019, I remember distinctively, suddenly my knees weren't feeling so stiff anymore. I could bend down. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening, right? I remember sending an email right away to my functional medicine doctor that I think is working. I think something has shifted. And that was the first sign. And I was excited. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is working. After a year and a half, I think it was, 1.5 years of kind of working on my mindset, my emotion, my gut, all kinds of things started to shift. And they just kept getting better. In 2020, when the world shut down, I was getting better. I was all excited being at home. I was getting better. Things just kept improving, you know. Even 2020, we had gone out west because everything shut down. So we traveled in Canada. There were certain hikes I couldn't do. 2021, I was able to do a hike and I was like, oh my gosh, like things just getting better. And I don't remember when, you know, I started be able to make a fist. This actually right hand, I would say probably about 9 months ago, I was still stuck here in the night. And now I can make most. It's back. That was like my biggest. What's left now, I would say I'm 90% healed, or what they in medical community they like to call in remission, but I don't like that word, and I'll tell you another time why I don't like that word. But my ankles and my wrists are still stiff and slightly painful. The CRP, which is a marker for inflammation, is slightly elevated. So because I still have a bit of stiffness in my wrists and my ankles, and sometimes they act up and I'll be wearing like a support, you know, just so that it's not painful. But it's nothing compared to where I was, you know. So even this, I don't even worry about it because I've seen my body heal from where it was at such a low place to where I'm now. I mean, at that time, you know, some things I read, they said, well, you can end up in a wheelchair in 5 years. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't think I would be here in 5 years. So yes, I still have a bit of stiffness. I don't worry about it. I think it will go. And if it doesn't go, it doesn't go. I'm no longer in that place of fear. I have a lot more faith in my body's ability to heal, right? And it's not just me. You know, the thing is that I heard I met few people, I heard many stories of people who get better because all our bodies have the potential. So I'm not unique. Every one of us has that potential for healing. You know, like I got the hope from my ND, that's what my purpose really is, to let people know, to make people aware of what's possible, right? It may be a long journey, it may be a different journey, but the reality is it is possible for all of us, right? And I'm not sure what's on the next slide, but let's see. Okay, so now that you know my story, we have a bit of time to talk about the lessons that I kind of learned, right? One of them is really, this is really important. Symptoms are body's way of communicating with us. That's a really different mindset, right? Our bodies want to heal. You know, even if you look at the scientific literature, they talk about homeostasis. Our body always wants to come to balance, right? When there's symptoms, it's because something is off balance. So this is something that, you know, through working with different practitioners, this is what I learned, that symptoms are our body's language, right? You can manage the symptoms. There's nothing wrong with taking medications. I took anti-inflammatory up until I would say about 9. I mean, I tried to come off it a few times, but I couldn't, and I went back on. And so then I started reducing the dose, and I would say about 6 months or 9 months ago, I was able to stop it. But I was on it for almost 4 years, right? Despite the fact that my doctor said, well, if you get, you know, bleeding, then you can't take that. And I'm like, no, I got rid of that fear. Initially, there was a lot of fear. I'm like, it's not going to happen. I know it's a small percentage of people who get it. I'm not going to get the bleed. I will take it because that was the only thing that allowed me to get out of bed in the morning because I would be so stiff. So it's okay. It doesn't matter if you're taking the medications. I really believe the way it should work is you take medications so you can actually live your life and you start working on your lifestyle. And as you start getting better, you start weaning off the medication. And that's the path I took, right? So that's an important message. But let's go into some of the deeper learnings I got from my own healing. Now, I thought I can maybe share 5 lessons, but there were so many lessons. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put it all down there. It might be too much, but you can always go back to the recording. Again, we won't go into deep details, but just so that you're aware that there is so much we can do. And some of these may be very out of box thinking for you, right? Like it was for me to think about my emotions were affecting my health. And when ND told me, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But this probably was the single most important thing for me because what these, and some of you may have heard, if you took my course on stress management, I always say everything that ever happened to you is stored within you in your subconscious mind. And oftentimes, when we perceive the present, it's going through that filter of the past. So the past becomes the present. And that's what activates our nervous system. I had a lot of emotions. suppressed emotions, right? I grew up, and I don't know how everybody's sort of culture background is, but my culture was very much about, you don't show emotions. You know, suppressed emotions is the way to go. You cannot cry. I wasn't allowed to cry. So I had a lot of baggage. That was activating my nervous system. Nervous system, when you are constantly in that flight or fight mode, we talked about it last time, it keeps you chronically inflamed, right? Tons and tons of studies on this showing that when your nervous system is not regulated, you are going to have inflammation, right? So this for me, I mean, the food wasn't major for me. This was the driving force for me. So that's why when this happened, and the thing about this kind of work is, and that's why I always say this disease was now in hindsight, like in 2019, I wasn't seeing this as a gift, but now I see it as a gift because it really changed the way I live my life. Not only did it heal me for my physical symptoms, but you know, I live differently. My relationships have improved. Things have just changed for me, you know, because when you regulate your nervous system, the life just seems so much better, you know, so much more enjoyable. Learn to trust your inner guidance, your intuition. We all have it, right? That gut feeling, that intuition. I had that faint voice inside of me that kept saying, you know, look for an answer. You got to figure something out. Why is your body attacking itself? Even though I was surrounded by people who thought I was crazy, you know, and they meant well. You know, my family, my colleagues, they all thought that, you know, I would probably make my condition much worse if I didn't start the treatment early enough. But there was that something inside of me that said, no, you know, I got to just figure, it's just a little, and I thank my doctor for trusting me and saying, okay, I'll give you some time. You know, go find whatever you need to find. But learning to trust that intuition is really important. We all have it, but I think as a society, we've become head thinkers. And yet there's a lot of value to the sixth sense. And if you look in neuroscience research, they're actually talking about intuition is real, right? We all have it. All of the animals have intuition, including us, right? So learning to cultivate that and trust is really important. Okay, letting go of fear. Fear really is a driving force for a lot of people. I realized that as I started talking to people, you know, and I think it's our systems are built around fear. Look at the medical system, look at the COVID-19 pandemic, how much fear was put into us, right? And maybe they had their reasons, but fear is not good for our nervous system. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that fear activates your nervous system because your nervous system is activated when you don't feel safe. Well, if you're feeling fear, you're not feeling safe, right? So you're constantly in that flight or fight mode. And when you're in the flight or fight mode, you cannot heal. Your nervous system is activated, your inflammation markers are high, you can't heal. So when I worked through my emotions, I thought this was a big one, and I still have, and I think sometimes fear is almost generational. Like, you know, my parents went through wars and changing countries with like 5 kids in tow, and it was tough for them. So I feel like almost fear was almost learned behavior for us, right? And so fear is something that's still very much part of me, but I'm aware. And I know when fear is creeping up, I know how to work through, right? So it's just the awareness is step one. How much is fear driving you? And if it is a big factor, then work on that because it can really inflame you. Now, visualize your body healing. I've talked about this in one of the workshops we did on healing mindset, right? This is really mindset work. And again, this is all based in neuroscience. In fact, they have, you know, professional soccer players. They actually work through, they visualize scoring a goal. This is real stuff. This is not like magic. You have to start you have to start believing that you will get better. You know, that big fall I had from my diagnosis up to like, you know, within 3 months is because I really believed that my life is over. I believed that this was it. I was gonna end up in the wheelchair, you know, and it's only when I start believing, when my ND said, oh, you know, you can get better. And I started actually believing that things started changing for me. And this visualization was very hard for me because I was in pain. To imagine a body now, to imagine what I'm feeling now wasn't possible for me then because I was in, but yet every night I'd close my eyes and imagine a healed body. And slowly over time, because the mind and the body is connected. There's no doubt about that. I think that's probably the worst thing we've done in medical science is separated the two. They're not separate. Our thoughts create chemicals. We know that, right? So mind and body is connected. When you start feeling those good emotions, your body starts healing. address your gut. I mean, there's no, gut, there's a lot of evidence building up. I've said this before. Even if, for me, for years, I used to be constipated. As a child, I was constipated. As an adult, I was constipated, right? It was, I would say, probably in the last 10 years or so, or, since I did my nutrition and I started eating better, my constipation was better, but years and years of damage to my gut built up. So it had a huge role in my illness for sure. And I always say seek professional help, because gut healing is more than taking probiotics. It's really addressing what's going on. And gut and brain are connected. You cannot you cannot work on your stress. You can't work on your gut if you haven't worked on your stress, because no matter what you do, if you're stressed out, that gut is not going to work. There's a very powerful gut and gut brain connection that, you can research on that. It's all out there. Okay. Diet is important, but it's not the be all and end all. Now, it might be a surprise coming from a nutritionist, but like I said, for me, diet wasn't that big. And here's the thing. Yes, you should eat good food. You should eat real food. Cut out the sugars, because that's really important. That had a huge impact on my health when I cut out the sugars. Eat good quality oils. But what happens is if we get too fixated on it, it creates a lot of stress, right? So if you're going to eat food, but you're not going to enjoy it, and you're going to get stressed about having the most organic, the most cleanest, the stress is going to make it worse. It's not worth it, right? Finding that balance between eating good food that doesn't stress you out is really, really important. They talk about the Mediterranean diet, and one of the Mediterranean diet, the bottom of the pyramid, is really eating with meals with people, right? That connection part is huge, right? And we'll talk about that. So food is important, but it's not the end all and be all, right? Sometimes, like I said, when I got sick, I was eating really well, and I was actually quite stressed out about what I was eating, because I wanted to make sure. And even, when I got sick, I didn't like having my kids eat out all the time, and we were eating out because I couldn't cook, right? So I had to let go of a lot of stuff, right? But they're totally fine, without having to eat out for those couple of years when I was so sick, it was okay. So again, just knowing that it's not the only thing. The stress is really important. Sorry, I think my batteries are dying on this. Hopefully it will survive. Practice self-love, self-care, self-compassion, right? Whichever one of those you choose to do, the idea is do not neglect yourself. I had no idea. I didn't have any concept of this. I was really into the hustle culture, always doing. I felt like if I spent time on myself, that was a waste of my time. And I don't know how many of you feel that way. I've noticed that when I talk to people, a lot of women tend to do that because we're caregivers. Again, I was looking after my elderly parents, even though I have siblings, but it was me. I was doing it. I wasn't letting anybody step up, right? So because I didn't know how to do this part, right? My inner narrative was very critical, right? That's a huge part of self-love, is really becoming aware of your inner narrative. How are you to yourself? Are you very critical when you do make a mistake, right? So a lot of that I had to work on. Fill up your cup first so you can give from a full cup. This is really important. I know I was given from an empty cup. Own your disease. What do I mean by that? Remember when I talked about initially, I was very ashamed of I didn't want anybody to find out, right? But if you change the definition of illness isn't really a weakness of the body, right? It's just the body trying to talk to you. That's all it is, right? As a society, I think we've created this concept that if you're sick, there's something wrong with you. People feel sorry for you, but really it's just the body's trying to communicate with you. And I truly believe there are no accidents in life. And I truly believe, I think there was a reason why I got sick. I needed to change the way I live my life, right? Own your illness, but don't let it define you, right? You are not your illness, right? I had inflammation. I still have inflammation, but even when I tell to people, I'm not talking about how sick I am. I'm talking about I'm on my path towards healing. And that's one of the words I changed also. Even when I wasn't that fully healed, I was like, yeah, I'm on my path towards healing. Even though my joints were hurting, well, I'm on the path, focusing, separating yourself from your disease, right? But being okay that, okay, my body's talking to me. It just wants me to change things and I can get better. Bring joy into your life. There is so much evidence, and life doesn't need to be serious. Have a laugh, play things, do things that you used to enjoy as a child. I always tell some clients that, if you like painting or arts, whatever it is you liked You know, I love kids. My kids are older, but I used to borrow like my nephew's kids, and because they just love to play, right? And you can get down and play with them. So bring play into your life. You know, there's a reason why there's something called laughter therapy. It's huge in India. There's laughter yoga they practice. Even here, there's places where they practice because they've found that laughter decreases your inflammation, right? So these things are not just, you know, they're great, but they also affect the inflammation. Meditate or do a flow activity, right? Again, meditation isn't for everybody. Like I said, for me, that was huge. I knew that could change me, and I started doing it, and I still meditate. You know, what it's allowed me to do is I don't get fixated in my head so much, right? You know, sometimes, and I talk to some people and say, well, I can't get the thought out of my head. Meditation rewires your brain. You're no longer in your head as much. If you can't meditate, do activities that are called flow activity. What that means that they're so enjoyable for you that you kind of lose track of time. You're not in your head, you're in that activity. Sometimes for some people, it's knitting, it's painting, whatever it is, you are in that activity. You're not in your head, you're in the present moment. That's when your body moves into that rest and digest phase, and that's when healing takes place. And it's not even how long you do it for. It's about the consistency. Every day, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You know, like when I started meditating, I started with 20 minutes. I do 10 minutes now. But it's the consistency every single day, because that's what rewires your brain. Movement. I've talked about this before. It doesn't have to be intensive. It could be anything, because movement actually decreases inflammation. There's a lot of evidence on that. And I know when I was sick, I didn't, you know, I had a membership at the gym. I was going to cancel it. I said, no, I'm not going to cancel it. So I'd go in the pool, you know, I'd do weights in the pool. I would maybe for 10 minutes, but I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to go back. Even though I was in so much pain, I kind of continued whatever little I could do. And invest in your health. Again, you know, I invested a lot of money, but money, maybe, unfortunately, the way our system is designed, it won't cover any of these holistic healing modalities. We only really have one modality that's being covered, right? Some of you may have extended coverage, you may have, but I didn't. So I invested money, and I don't regret a penny of it. But even if you don't have access to money, the time, invest the time, right? Take the time to do those. You know, oftentimes when I tell people, you know, take the time to do the flow activity, take the time to go out and make connections, to play, because that time you invest in your health doesn't cost you anything, but it can make a huge difference. Asking for help, right? You know, I was a doer. For me, this was really, really hard to actually, but my body would not let me do. I had to ask. For me, initially, it was really hard. And many of us suffer. We're like, okay, no, we have to keep doing it because either no one else can do it as well as I can. I realized they can actually do better. My kids can actually do better than what I can. But I had to, I was forced to do it. And now I've learned, you know, 2 days ago, actually, I was telling my family that I'm feeling overwhelmed. You know, there's too much on my plate because I had a busy week. I said, I need you guys to take something on. So I told them 2 days you guys are cooking. I'm not cooking anymore. So today they're cooking. So there you go. I've learned to ask for help and not feel bad about it, because it's okay, right? We can't do everything. And not being productive does not make us any less human, right? I used to think that, oh, if I'm not doing things, I'm no good. But this is what I learned, that we are human beings, not human doings. Learning how to say no, right? Very hard. Every time an opportunity came to me, I'm like, oh no, I can't. It's an opportunity. I have to do it. Now I've learned that I know what I can handle. I know my capacity. You know, I can't overdo my capacity because then it's too much for me, right? And it doesn't mean I'm saying no from a place of, well, you know, meanness. It's because it's really almost from a place of self-love that I don't have the capacity for it. And I tell them, I'm sure you'll find someone else that can help you. And they usually do, right? So I don't always, even like, for example, with my parents, right? I let go, like with my mom now, I have siblings that take different parts, right? So I've learned to say no when I need to, which I do. And the last thing, building connections. Really, really important. I think there's a new study that just recently came out. I was listening to it about it. It talks about how building connections in terms of cardiovascular health is even better than lowering your cholesterol, right? And we have gone through 2 years of COVID, right? And it's really, and this was something as crazy as it sounds now that I think about it, I never made time to go out with people, have coffee with my friends, you know, hang out with people, just have a chat. I was just so busy doing things. I can't even imagine how I was living my life. But now, when I got sick and I started working through it, I made time. I always make sure that I meet with friends, you know, I go places, I go for walks with friends, I make connections, and I actually genuinely enjoy connecting, right? Because there's real value to it. Find people who, you know, who inspire you, who see the glass half full, not half empty. Because those are the people that when you're surrounded, even sometimes listening to podcasts that are inspirational, you're like, oh, life's not so bad. Like you start, those connections are very powerful. And you know, positivity is contagious for sure. And there's studies to prove that connections strengthen our immune system, right? Remember, inflammation is because of a dysregulated immune system. When your immune system is stronger, you do better. It lowers stress. It helps us live longer. So make connection. And again, I'm a true believer that when you make the intention, you will find the right people to connect with, right? It's almost like they come into your life, right? When you make the intention. So I truly believe that. It may sound a little bit out there, but I really believe intentions are important. And I think that's the last of the slide. And we're just 5 minutes before. Doesn't matter where you are on your journey. Doesn't matter how long you've been sick for. Doesn't matter what medications you're taking. It doesn't matter. Our bodies want to heal. You know, you can continue what you're doing, but having learned all this, just know that you have the capacity to heal, right? Start believing in that. Maybe adopt a few things that I've talked about, right? Something that resonates with you, right? And start implementing that into your life because your bodies do want to heal, right? That's why they're giving you signs. They want to heal. And that's it. That's the last slide. Again, for those of you who are not on my email list, make sure you get on the email list because that's probably the best way to find out when we're restarting this, September, October. And you know how to do it. Just go onto my website. It will first thing's gonna pop up, and you can put your email in. And yeah, that's it. I think I'm gonna stop the recording because it's gonna be really long. Okay. And recording.